Our interview this morning is with Michael Z. Blood. Michael was born in Keene, New Hampshire in March of 1958. He served in the United States Army from March of 1975 until March of 1997. His highest rank attained was E7, Sergeant First Class. This interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Friday, December the 5th, 2014. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Michael in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember in Burleson, Texas. And with that little intro, Michael, you can tell us your story about your 22 years served in the United States Army.
Thank you. I joined the Army in '75 when I was old enough. I got my mom to sign the paperwork and I was out of there. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and for basic training. Kind of interesting because it's the same place my son took his basic training at just a few years ago. I took basic infantry training there because I had enlisted to be a mortarman. I had no idea what that entailed, but after basic at Fort Jackson, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for 11 Charlie training, which is learning how to shoot a mortar, which is a small artillery piece. We started out with 81 millimeter mortars, which is little small ones, and before I knew it, they had picked teams for people to train on the 4-deuce mortar, which is a mite bigger. Usually they're vehicle mounted, but they can be dismounted. And my job was to carry the tube. After AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training, at Fort Polk, I was assigned to Lee Barracks in Germany, 8th Infantry Division. And I was in a combat support company, which is a bunch of grunts that are specialized in either red-eye, mortars, the track-mounted cannons, the Jeep-mounted cannons back then. Anyway, it was a combat support company. We supported the tankers and the infantry. I did that for a few years, and then they came up with a concept called 13 Fox, Field Artillery Observer, or Fire Sport Coordinator. It was lessons learned from Vietnam, from so many folks getting killed from indirect fires. They were asking for volunteers throughout the artillery and infantry companies for folks that wanted to do this or see if it was feasible. So I volunteered and became amongst a team of about 60 people. I was one of the first awarded the 13 Fox MOS. Upset a lot of people while we were doing this. We took a bunch of equipment from artillery units. We took a bunch of equipment from the infantry units to formulate this whole concept and see if it would work. When I left Germany, I went to Fort Carson, Colorado, and it was I got assigned to a unit that didn't have a clue what a 13 Fox was. So they made me the R&U guy, which convinced me that I needed to get out. So my wife was pregnant. We had a baby, I didn't really want to get out, but I wanted to go somewhere else. So I got out of the Army at the end of my 4-year hitch, and I was out for 2 years and decided that I got divorced because I wanted to go back in. I had to get my 214 fixed because there was a weird code on there, so the governor had to get involved and get that fixed for me so I could get back in. Went back in the Army with long hair, no uniforms. Didn't have to go back through basic AIT because it had been under 2 years. And went directly to Fort Hood looking like I was AWOL. Which I got a real weird welcome there. Folks were rather unconvinced that I had just re-enlisted. But I showed them my orders. They squared me away with uniforms and got me a haircut. Got assigned to 1st 82nd Field Artillery there. It was, it had been a couple years, so I lost my rank. I was a corporal when I got out. They put me back in an E2, and so I had to start over again. But shortly after that, I spent a few years at Fort Hood trying to prove myself. Did a bunch of training with the Guard. Didn't take me long to get my Spec 4 back, and then corporal. Went to different places. I think that was when they came out with the RPV, a remotely piloted vehicle, one of those little planes. They fly around and take pictures of everything. And 1st Cav is a very demanding unit. They 1st Cav wants to have their fingers in everything. So we spent a lot of time out in the field trying to prove this RPV either worked or didn't. We would go out there and set up camouflage and hide under it. They wouldn't be able to find us, so we'd have to get out of the camouflage and go out in the middle of the field so it could find us, and then go hide in the woods without camouflage. It was rather interesting, just roaming around in the woods of Fort Hood, either hiding or trying to be obvious for this RPV. I think it crash landed on 190 a few times. And we would get to go in from the field while they fixed it, and then we'd have to go back out. It was rather interesting. From there, I went to Camp Stanley, Korea, and that was an awakening. I think that was the end of my second marriage. It's just, Army life is hard when you're gone all the time. It's hard for spouses. Got promoted to E6 there. Went to Chejudo Island, learned how to rappel. Learned a lot about a nationality that I never thought I would ever meet. Turned out my dad was in the Korean War. I'm not sure what he did, but it felt kind of nostalgic to be in the same country that my dad had served in years before me. Did DMZ mission, did 2 of them while I was there, which was pretty interesting. Can't really talk a whole lot about that, but it was interesting. I went back to Fort Hood after Korea. I got back there and I was grabbed up by 3 Corps, and the Sergeant Major of the NCO Academy there told me he wanted me to be an instructor. I've been in line units up to that point, and I wasn't really very refined. I told him I thought, knowing what that would entail, you know, the 3 Corps commander is your commander, and I wasn't sure that I was cut out for all that, you know, bureaucracy. I liked the idea, but I wasn't sure. He said, he said that I owed him an opportunity to at least go through the instructor course and let him decide if I was refined enough to be an instructor or not. And so I did, of course. I'm not going to tell a 3 Corps Sergeant Major no. So I went through the instructor course, and it turned out as long as when I learned how to curb my language a little bit better, I actually enjoyed being an instructor, and I did that for a couple of years. Trained at 13 Fox BNOT, Basic NCO Academy course, and it was fun. I got to touch a lot of young NCOs that did my job in a way that could positively affect the way that they were going to do their job later in life, and who knows, maybe save some lives. I was one of the guys that walked around talking about when a balloon goes up, you need to be ready to go to war. I talked about that for years, not really being sure in my own head if I was ever going to experience that, you know. But I was dang well going to make sure that anybody in my charge is going to be ready. On Thursdays, we would do, in Fort Hood on Thursdays, they would do what they called sergeant's time, where you had your troops to do whatever training you wanted to do with your soldiers. You just clear it with the first sergeant, and as long as it was a meeting, it wasn't going downtown to the bar or something, you know. If it was meaningful training, you could do anything you want with your troops. They were yours for that part of the day. And we would do all kinds of crazy stuff. And because, you know, never know when the balloon's going up. That's what I used to tell. When I got done as an instructor, I went back to line unit. And shortly after that, we got a call that Hussein had invaded Saudi Arabia and was taking over the oil fields. But don't worry, because you know, it'd be a month or so before we would deploy. I think it was the next night we had an alert, and we were moving out we were going to be moving out at like 1300. We were loading up on planes the next morning. So we had to jump through hoops to pack up everything in the barracks, get automobiles put somewhere. My soldiers parked half the platoon parked their cars at my house. I had a couple acres of land out in the country in Kemner, and they brought their cars full of stuff and just left them in my yard, which was kind of interesting. But we headed out, and we ended up getting over there, and they used us. We set up on the docks where the boats were going to be coming in. We were going to be part of the unit that was unloading equipment off the boats. And as soon as we got the majority of the equipment unloaded and motor pooled, the unit that I was assigned to, 1/8 Cav, we headed out and headed out in the desert, set up perimeters, and start running missions. It was after about a month or so, we got word that 1/8 was going to be getting new Bradleys. The new Bradleys had come out, and they were going to be getting them. Well, up until this point, 13 Foxes, Fisters, have been riding around in converted 113s, armored personnel carriers, small track vehicles. And for us, they added 3 tons and put a hammerhead on top with our glid and our laser rangefinders and, you know, all the gyros, you know, locators and all this. They put a hammerhead on there and added an extra 3 tons to a vehicle that was already struggling to keep up with tanks and Bradleys. And we'd had that for years. But now the grunts were getting new Bradleys. So some of us NCOs came up with an idea that why don't we take their old ones? You know, what are they going to do with them? Park them in the desert? Why don't we take the old ones, convert them into FISVs? Now we can protect ourselves, keep up with them, and actually have enough room for our soldiers and gear and equipment back in the back. Our sergeant major got word of what we were trying to do, and he decided he was going to spearhead this. And we ended up Colt teams, the FIST teams that supported the grunts got Bradleys. We had to learn how to drive them, shoot them, because we kept the 25 millimeter gun. We had to go to the range, learn how to shoot them, how to do maintenance on them, keep them running. It was pretty interesting. I revamped my whole team. The driver I had driving the 113 he was not comfortable with the Bradley, and so I reorganized my whole team with the FOs and the RTOs. I had a 13-man squad because I had separate people that would go out with the platoons, with the grunt platoons, and a commander. Of course, the LT would go with the commander, and we reorganized and drove on. Converted that Bradley into a FISV, pretty cool, and we had a good time over there learning this. And turned out the Army liked the concept so much that now the FIST vehicle for teams that go out with scouts, Colt teams, teams that support infantry units, now they use the Bradleys. They don't have the little 113s anymore. They put an actual hammerhead on it and mounted everything professional. Us, we had sandbags and drilled holes and bolted our glids down in front of the TC hatch, and we were protected by a little group of sandbags around us. Yeah. Sergeant Blood, what's the range of that target? Hold on a minute. We'll get it. It was interesting. Desert Storm and Desert Shield that was one of the times when, there was a time before we moved out, when the war actually started. There was a time that I had a quiet moment with God, because I wasn't a big churchgoer. My family wasn't. I didn't really have a whole lot to do with God, but I wanted to. But if he was up there, I wanted him to know that I needed his help. I'd never been in war before. I didn't know if you don't know what you're gonna do. You know, I watched all the old war movies and the John Wayne movies and all that stuff. You know, I'd seen all that stuff, and I didn't know how Mike Blood was going to act. I had 13 men that were my responsibility, and I wanted God to know that don't let me turn out to be one of them cowards, you know. Don't, you know, whatever happens, give me whatever I need, strength, courage, whatever it is, to do my job. And that's all I needed. From then on, I wasn't worried. I don't know why. Turns out years later, turns out that God's been right beside me my whole life, and I just didn't know it. But I brought all my guys home. We did our job over there, and took care of business, and I brought them all back. After going to war, coming home from stuff like that is you know, kind of like, what do you do now? You know, you've done your job, which you were training to do your whole life, and what do you do now? It was. I'm lucky. It wasn't many months after we got back that I came down on a levy to go back to Germany. So I was lucky in that aspect. I got to go somewhere else. The whole drawback, getting all the equipment back and all that from Desert Storm, it was a monotonous job. You know, they gave us a bunch of days off when we got back. It was slow, you know, time to learn how to slow down again. I came back on levy for Germany and headed over there. Got assigned to, I thought I was going to Hamburg, because that's what my order said. But it turned out somebody put an H on the front of Amberg, which is at the other end of the spectrum when you're talking about Germany. I went way up north. They didn't have any use for 13 Foxes up there. Guy had no idea why they sent me there. He said, let me make some phone calls. So that night I jumped on a train. I reported in when I was supposed to, but just in the wrong part of the state. So he found out that after some phone calls that you probably are supposed to be in Hamburg. So like I say, I jumped on a train, headed south. Ended up and got to the Hamburg Bahnhof. Got a cab with all my gear and told him I needed to go to the Kaserne, you know, the nearest Kaserne. So he brought me to the 2nd Armored Cav Regiment Kaserne that was there in town. And turns out that's where I was supposed to be. I was there for a few months, long enough to get my household goods, which was 2 motorcycles and all the rest of my gear, stereo. Sergeant Major thought it was kind of funny when he saw my household goods show up. He had to come down and kind of check the situation out. He gave me a place to keep them. It was a small post, but he showed me where I could park them, keep them safe, keep them out of the weather, middle of winter time. And I was there for a few months, went to the field a few times. it wasn't long that we got orders to close down Amberg. They shut down that post, and a few months later, after we were done, I bought the Sergeant Major's old Mercedes he had, so I had transportation. We ended up shutting down Amberg, and I got assigned to Kurtzgoins, which is up around Blue Spot, Gießen, up in that area. And at first it was a dull place, kind of quiet compared to Amberg. And that didn't last long, because it turned out I met this little German girl there and fell in love. So it was different. I lived in an arms room while I was there. They had built new barracks for the troops, so they took all the little troop buildings and turned them into office buildings and all that. And the small office buildings and arms rooms and stuff, they turned over to the senior NCOs. So I got to live in an arms room while I was there. Kind of neat to have my bedroom in a steel cage, bars on the windows. Pretty interesting. Had both motorcycles in my second room. It was after a few years, I got orders to go back to Fort Hood. And I was getting to the point of retirement at that point, and I was trying to decide what I was going to do. I didn't go to First Cav this time when I went back to Fort Hood. They sent me to they used to be Second AD. They when they left, they put 4th ID there, and got assigned to 4th Infantry Division there at Fort Hood. Went to the field, supported different units, and got assigned to the Air Armored Cav Regiment, being their fire support NCO, which means now I was going out there doing planning fires in support of attack helicopters that were going out ahead of the battlefield and taking out enemy units. And that was pretty interesting. It was the first time I'd done that. It was totally different bunch of people. I was used to hanging out with tankers and infantry, and now I'm with a bunch of air troop guys. They didn't live out of their vehicle, or didn't eat their meals off the back of a deuce and a half. They actually got food brought out to them and had a mess hall. Lived in tents. It was a whole nother world for me. I welcomed it and enjoyed it, but I was getting a little older at that point too, I guess. A little comfort didn't hurt nobody. So yeah, when I was, that was the last real job I had, I guess. Then 6 months out from retirement, they put me in, assigned me to the headquarters, and I started this process of going to meetings, learning how to be a civilian again. Shortly after that, I come down on orders for Korea. They wanted me to re-up. Even though I was fixing to retire, they wanted me to re-up and go back to Korea. En route, I was going to go to First Sergeant School. And I had married that little German girl, and we had a baby on the way, another one, at that point. And the idea of going back to Korea, the idea of going to First Sergeant School and getting promoted was really tempting. But my little, I didn't know if I had lost other relationships because I was gone so much, and I didn't want that to happen again. I had a real family this time, and I didn't want anything to jeopardize that. So I opted to turn down the assignment and get out. I had 20 active and 2 inactive reserve. So I was going to get paid. In hindsight, I wish I'd have been more mature, more trusting. I wished I'd have had God in my life at that point, because I would have been more trusting, more mature about it, and I would have probably stayed in. But I guess that's the only regret that I really have, is that I called it quits at that point. Yeah. If you hadn't figured it out, God has made a big difference in my life in the last few years. And yeah, I had an opportunity last summer when a bunch of my soldiers that I served over in the desert with, they were in our unit. I came to the house, and we had an opportunity to spend some time together. It was a weekend thing, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was about 20 of them, 22 of them, I think, showed up. And it was interesting for my wife to see. According to her, I change when I'm around my troops. You know, you would think right off the bat it'd be, oh yeah, your language got rotten, you know, and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't that. She said it was more the man I was. And that struck a chord with me. A bunch of the guys made the comments that, you believe this is Sergeant Blood? I guess I grew up since then, and I wasn't that rough. I guess it turns out I was a pretty rough dude. I was pretty rough on them. And surprisingly, they all loved me for it, because I was that guy. Because that's who I needed to be at that point. I had a couple folks that I was pretty rough on come back and tell me that I changed their life because I was who I was, and made them, held their feet to the fire and made them do what they were supposed to do. It was humiliating, and not humiliating. It was gave me humility to see how they felt about me after so many years, and I wondered about that.
I don't normally break in, Michael, but it was humiliating for you?
No, it gave me humility.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to say humiliating. I meant it gave me humility to see.
Made you a more humble person when you heard
very.
what these guys had to say.
Yeah,
Made you feel good that you did a good job.
yeah, but and like I said, I made mistakes, while I was in. I'd partied hard and sometimes drank too much. Got in a few little scrapes here and there, but the one thing that was important to me was I a good boss? I thought I did a good job taking care of my troops, protected them from problems they were having, or backed them up, and when it was in times of trouble, kept them out of as many rotten details as possible, and if stuff did come up, then we were all there together, I remember sometimes we'd have Friday motor pool cleanup days before we could be dismissed to go home, inspections and all that. Sometimes if guys was knocking out and I'd cut them loose, they'd come down and do an inspection, and I'd be standing in front of all the vehicles by myself. And they'd walk through, Sergeant Major or whoever was coming, Colonel, walk through and want to know where everybody was. They're at home, Sergeant Major. I sent them home. Well, who's going to tell you if there's any problems with the equipment or the way things look? I'll take care of it. And I did that. I did that quite often. So the troops, they knew Sergeant Blood would be there for them, something come up. And like I said, I tried to take care of it, which meant I'll take the chewing. I'll take this one. You guys go home. Yep. I don't know what else really to.
Well, let me back up and ask you a couple of questions.
All right.
That Army is sure in your blood, that's for sure.
You think?
And you're meeting with God. You say a lot of good things that on this interview, people get a feel of what it's like to be an NCO. You obviously felt very strongly this taking care of your troops. I think it's been good, but let me ask you some questions here. Let's see here. Fort Hood, out to prove drones, I guess, really, is pretty much what these unmanned vehicles were.
Yeah, it's the beginning of what is now
The unmanned.
Yeah.
You lived in the field.
Mm-hmm.
You live in a tent?
No, we lived out of the back of a 113.
Deuce and a half?
No, 113 track vehicle with
Okay.
with that vehicle, that fist V I told you about with a hammerhead on top. Yeah, we lived out of the back of it.
What'd you do for a mess? Just eat out of cans?
Oh, MREs are good. MREs are good. They're better than the old C rations. We didn't get cigarettes with them anymore